Israel's army has said it's carrying out significant strikes and has divided the Gaza Strip in two. The military says it's planning to further expand airstrikes, with its troops having encircled Gaza City. Some people have been able to leave northern Gaza, but those who've made the journey to seek safety further south say it's very dangerous.
The Israeli Defense Forces have once again intensified operations in northern Gaza. They say they are targeting Hamas fighters and infrastructure from the air, sea and land. Israel has repeatedly warned civilians to move south, where it is supposed to be safer. But a planned humanitarian corridor did not materialise, and those who do risk the journey say it's very dangerous.
We've been walking for 3 hours to get here. I can't walk, and my son has been pushing me all the way.
The situation is very difficult. There's no bread, no water, nothing. Tanks in front of us and dead bodies. It was very, very scary, especially for the kids.
The Israeli military has released what it says is evidence that Hamas is blocking roads to stop civilians leaving and using schools and hospitals as cover for its attacks.
This is part of an operation, a ground operation that was conducted on the hospital, then revealed a tunnel that was being used for terror infrastructures in the Qatari hospital. They launch rockets on Israel 75 meters from an hospital. Why? They know precisely that if Israel will airstrike a launch pad like that, the hospital would be damaged.
As the attacks in the north intensify, Israel now says it has split the Gaza Strip into two. And despite increasing international calls for a ceasefire, Israel says that won't happen until all the hostages held by Hamas are freed. And until then, those on the ground can only take shelter and hope to survive.
Internet and phone services have been cut again in Gaza. DW's Ben Fasoulin in Jerusalem told us what that could mean.
They're the same reports we're getting, Monica, and when we hear those reports, then it means a major bombardment is coming. We had a statement released by the Israeli Defense Forces earlier saying that intense strikes were going to continue. And sure enough, as soon as we got this news that the internet and telephone lines were down, the third blackout of its kind over the past month, then sure enough there were reports coming from AFP, the AFP news agency, that an intense bombardment had begun that went on for about an hour. Hamas also told journalists that the intense bombardments were centered around several hospitals. An AFP person also confirming that. The Israeli army then going on to say that it had cut the Gaza Strip in two. Earlier, we had been reporting that tanks had tightened their encirclement of Gaza City. Also that there'd been another day of rocket attacks launched by Hamas towards Israel.
Now, cutting Gaza in two and presumably more bombardment, what's this mean for the civilians in the Gaza Strip?
Good question, Monica. It is a dire situation, becoming even more dire. If they're left in the dark, so to speak, when it comes to telecommunications, they're not going to know where to go. These are really important times when it comes to using your mobile phone and being able to warn family members and tell others where strikes have hit. Some of these bombardments, according to one journalist in the very south, were so intense that they could hear them all the way to Rafah in the south. The Rafah border crossing still cut off today. The only escape route for dual nationals and the most critically injured. There have been intense diplomatic negotiations going on between Egypt, Qatar and the US to try to reopen, but unsuccessful, and only a trickle of aid coming in. So really the humanitarian situation is just becoming unbearable for those 1.5 million displaced people right now.
DW's Ben Fasoulin in Jerusalem. And there are mounting fears of an escalation in the conflict on Israel's border with Lebanon. Lebanese officials say 4 civilians, including 3 children, have been killed in an Israeli airstrike near the southern town of Ainata. The Israeli says it is examining the incident and that the strike was based on intelligence. Lebanon's Hezbollah militant group has responded by firing rockets at the northern Israeli town of Kiryat Shmona. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been touring the Middle East to work on a solution for the conflict together with Arab states and also prevent the violence from spreading across the region. He's made an unexpected stop in Iraq and warned there must be no repeat of recent attacks on U.S. military bases there.
It was very important to send a very clear message to anyone who might seek to take advantage of the conflict in Gaza to threaten our personnel here or anywhere else in the region. Don't do it. I made very clear that the attacks, the threats coming from militia that are aligned with Iran are totally unacceptable, and we will take every necessary step to protect our people. We're not looking for conflict with Iran. We've made that very clear, but we'll do what's necessary to protect our personnel, be they military or civilian.
Our Washington correspondent Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber told me why Blinken found the time to stop in Iraq.
Iraq is an important partner for the United States. More than 2,500 American troops are deployed in the country. They are tasked with advising their Iraqi counterparts in the fight against the Islamic State group. And that's why his visit now, in his words, we just heard there, condemning the attacks against U.S. personnel by Iranian-backed militias are so significant. Secretary Blinken met with Iraq's Prime Minister al-Sudani in Baghdad. The focus of the talks that lasted for around an hour was the situation in Gaza and the risks of a further escalation in Israel's war with Hamas. The office of the Iraqi Prime Minister reaffirmed the country's call for, and I quote, a ceasefire and opening the border crossings to prevent further suffering among civilians, including women and children. Ahead of the stop in Baghdad, Secretary Blinken held talks in the occupied West Bank with Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, and there he spoke about violence against Palestinians in the West Bank and once again reiterated Washington's support for a two-state solution. So a difficult balance that Secretary Blinken is trying to achieve with these tours by committing on one side to the delivery of humanitarian assistance for Gaza, but at the same time rejecting a ceasefire due to his concerns that the Hamas terrorist group might use that ceasefire to regroup and prepare further attacks on Israel.
Right, and Secretary Blinken is expected to travel on to Turkey. What can we expect from his visit there?
We can expect protests like the ones that we saw earlier today when Turkish police fired tear gas to disperse a pro-Palestinian rally close to a military base that also houses U.S. forces in the country. The increasingly complicated relationship between Turkey and Israel will make this visit of Secretary Blinken quite difficult. We had Turkey recalling its ambassador to Israel for consultations, President Erdogan accusing Israel of committing war crimes, and Erdogan recently also said that Hamas is not a terrorist organization but a liberation group. And after that speech, Israel recalled its diplomats from Turkey. So this complicated relationship will definitely make this visit by the Secretary of State even more difficult.
Talking of difficulties and also protests you mentioned earlier, how's the mood in the US while its top diplomat is on a whirlwind trip through the Middle East?
So the discussions and the criticism on the role of the United States, of the Biden administration, can be seen on the streets on Washington here. Yesterday, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered close to the White House. That's a place called Freedom Plaza, to demand a ceasefire and an end to U.S. aid to Israel. But at the same time, the White House is also alarmed and condemns the alarming rise in anti-Semitic incidents at schools and on college campuses. And that's something that the White House also stated on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying that there is no place for hate in America. So thousands of kilometers away of the conflict, you can see that the discussions here in Washington, D.C., also on the role that the U.S. is playing here, are growing.
DW's Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber in Washington, D.C. Benjamin, thank you so much.